Behind its explosive Miami setting and steamy shower scenes, The Specialist harbored production secrets stranger than fiction. From Michael Douglas's Black Death vodka, lubricating reluctant nude scenes to a cat actor who'd become a Disney star, and a legendary composer who publicly called studio executives wankers. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about The Specialist. Fact 1. Steven Seagal almost directed and starred. Before Sylvester Stallone ever threw a punch or detonated a single explosive device in The Specialist, the film almost had a completely different leading man and director. Steven Seagal, the ponytailed action star known for his martial arts movies like Under Siege and Hard to Kill, was originally offered both the starring role and the director's chair for what would become one of 1994's most talked-about thrillers. Seagal was genuinely enthusiastic about the project and considered himself a fan of the original script. The story of a former CIA explosives expert seeking revenge in the steamy streets of Miami clearly appealed to his sensibilities as both an actor and potential filmmaker. However, Seagal came to the negotiating table with two very specific demands that would ultimately derail his involvement in the project. First, he wanted a massive $9 million payday for taking on the dual responsibilities of starring in and directing the film. This was an enormous sum for the early 1990s, especially for a project that the studio considered a mid-budget action thriller. The financial demand alone was enough to give Warner Brothers executives serious pause about moving forward with Seagal in charge. But the money wasn't the only sticking point. Seagal also insisted that all the steamy, erotic scenes be completely removed from the screenplay. This presented a fundamental problem since the sexual tension and romantic subplot between the two main characters formed a crucial part of the story's appeal. The script heavily featured the chemistry between the male and female leads, and removing those elements would have required a complete rewrite of the core narrative. When the studio balked at both his salary demands and his creative requirements, Seagal walked away from the project. The role in the film eventually went to Stallone, who had no such objections to either the budget or the steamier aspects of the story. Fact 2. Michael Douglas's vodka solved a crisis. One of the most infamous scenes in The Specialist nearly didn't happen at all, and it took a bottle of premium vodka from Michael Douglas to save the day. The steamy shower scene between Sylvester Stallone and Sharon Stone was scheduled to be filmed, but when the cameras were ready to roll, Stone absolutely refused to remove her robe and participate in the intimate sequence. The production had already cleared the set down to just a skeleton crew to make Stone more comfortable, but she remained completely unwilling to proceed with the nude scene. Stone had grown tired of being typecast as a sex symbol following her breakthrough role in Basic Instinct, and she was genuinely sick of doing nudity in films. When the director asked her what the problem was, she bluntly told everyone on set that she was simply tired of taking her clothes off for movies. Stallone, who was equally determined to shoot the scene as written, found himself in an increasingly tense standoff with his co-star. He promised Stone that he wouldn't take any liberties during filming and tried to reassure her about the professional nature of the scene, but she wasn't budging from her position. The situation reached a complete impasse, with production grinding to a halt while the two stars faced off over whether the scene would happen at all. That's when Stallone remembered a special bottle of Black Death vodka that Michael Douglas had given him as a gift. He left the set, went back to his trailer, and returned with the premium alcohol. After convincing Stone to join him for half a dozen shots of the potent liquor, both actors were sufficiently relaxed and uninhibited to proceed with filming the controversial scene. As Stallone later described the situation in interviews, after the vodka took effect, they were completely wet and wild, and the scene was successfully completed. The Black Death vodka had literally saved one of the movie's most talked-about sequences from never being filmed at all. Fact 3. David Fincher was almost the director. The Specialist could have been a completely different movie if Sylvester Stallone had gotten his way with his choice of director. Stallone was genuinely impressed with David Fincher's visual style and storytelling approach, and he specifically wanted the future Fight Club and Seven director to helm the explosive action thriller. This would have been a fascinating pairing, considering Fincher's dark, meticulous filmmaking style and Stallone's more straightforward action movie sensibilities. However, Stallone's preference for Fincher ran headlong into the harsh realities of Hollywood business decisions. The studio executives at Warner Brothers were absolutely unwilling to take a chance on Fincher, and they completely overruled Stallone's directorial choice. Their reasoning was entirely based on Fincher's most recent project, which had been a major disappointment both critically and commercially. Fincher had just finished directing Alien 3 in 1992, the third installment in the beloved science fiction franchise. The film had been a notorious production disaster, plagued by studio interference, script problems, and creative conflicts that left Fincher feeling completely frustrated with the entire experience. More importantly, from the studio's perspective, Alien 3 had performed poorly at the box office and received largely negative reviews from both critics and fans of the franchise. The failure of Alien 3 had essentially put Fincher's career in what the industry considered deep freeze. Despite his obvious talent and Stallone's confidence in his abilities, the studio executives saw him as too much of a financial risk for a project they hoped would be a major commercial success. They were unwilling to gamble on a director whose most recent film had been such a high-profile disappointment. Instead, Warner Brothers hired Luis Loza, a Peruvian director who had previously worked on smaller action films. Ironically, Fincher's career would be completely revived just 1 year later with the massive critical and commercial success of Seven in 1995, proving that Stallone's instincts about the director had been absolutely correct. Fact 4. Roger Moore refused, and was glad. Roger Moore, the legendary actor who played James Bond in 7 films during the 1970s and 80s, was approached to appear in The Specialist, but made a decision that he would later publicly celebrate. The production team offered Moore a role in the film, though the specific character he was meant to play has never been revealed. Given his sophisticated screen presence and experience with action films, Moore would have likely been cast as either one of the Miami crime bosses or perhaps a government official connected to the CIA storyline. However, Moore turned down the opportunity without much hesitation, choosing not to participate in what would become one of 1994's most controversial action thrillers. At the time of his decision, Moore had no way of knowing how the finished film would turn out, but his instincts about the project proved to be remarkably accurate. Years later, when Moore was writing his autobiography, he had the chance to reflect on his decision to pass on The Specialist. By that point, the film had been released, received largely negative reviews from critics, and earned a reputation as one of the more problematic entries in both Stallone's and Stone's filmographies. The movie had been heavily criticized for its confusing plot, over-the-top action sequences, and the awkward chemistry between its 2 lead stars. In his memoir, Moore made a point of mentioning his involvement with the project, or rather his lack of involvement. He specifically wrote that once he had seen the finished product, he was glad that he had made the decision to turn down the role. Moore's comment was particularly striking because he was known throughout his career for being diplomatic and rarely speaking negatively about other people's work in the film industry. The fact that such a gracious and professional actor felt compelled to express relief about avoiding the project speaks volumes about how The Specialist was perceived within Hollywood circles after its release. Fact 5. The cat actor became a Disney star. One of the most charming supporting characters in The Specialist turned out to have a much more successful Hollywood career than many of the human actors in the film. The orange tabby cat that plays Stallone's adopted pet, known as Timer in the movie, was actually a professional animal actor named Elvis, who would go on to achieve genuine stardom in family entertainment. In The Specialist, Timer serves as a subtle way to show the softer side of Stallone's character, Ray Quick. The cat appears early in the film when it starts following the explosives expert around Miami, and Quick eventually takes the stray animal home with him to his waterfront warehouse hideout. Throughout the movie, Timer appears in several scenes, providing a touch of warmth and humanity to an otherwise violent and intense action thriller. The character was important enough that the filmmakers made sure to show Timer safely escaping through a special hatch during the explosive finale, ensuring that animal-loving audiences wouldn't worry about the cat's fate. Elvis, the real cat behind the Timer character, delivered such a convincing performance that Disney took notice of his on-screen charisma and acting abilities. Just 3 years after The Specialist hit theaters, Elvis landed the starring role in Disney's 1997 remake of That Darn Cat, a family comedy about a cat who helps solve a kidnapping case. This was a significant step up in terms of both the prestige of the project and the size of the role, as Elvis went from being a supporting character to carrying an entire film as the main star. The fact that Elvis successfully transitioned from an rated action thriller to a wholesome Disney family movie demonstrates the impressive range and adaptability that made him such a sought-after animal actor in Hollywood. While many of the human stars of The Specialist saw their careers struggle in the years following the film's release, Elvis managed to parlay his supporting role into genuine leading cat status. Fact 6. Eric Roberts' immortal villain problem. The Specialist contains one of the most glaring continuity errors in action movie history, and it involves Eric Roberts apparently discovering the secret to eternal youth. Roberts plays Tomas Leon, the sadistic son of a Miami crime boss who is responsible for murdering Sharon Stone's character's parents when she was just a young child. The problem is that Roberts looks exactly the same age in both the present-day scenes and the flashbacks that are supposed to take place 30 years earlier. According to the film's timeline, Stone's character witnessed her parents' brutal murder as a little girl, and she has spent decades planning her revenge against the people responsible for destroying her family. This means that Roberts' character would have been a grown man committing these crimes roughly 3 decades before the main events of the movie take place. However, when the flashback sequences show the tragic night when Stone's parents were killed, Roberts appears on screen looking precisely the same as he does in the contemporary scenes. The age discrepancy becomes even more noticeable when you consider that Roberts was only 2 years older than Sharon Stone in real life at the time of filming. Stone was 36 years old when The Specialist was made, while Roberts was 38. Yet somehow, according to the movie's internal logic, his character was supposed to have been old enough to be a dangerous criminal 30 years earlier, which would have made him a murderous 8-year-old child when the flashback events occurred. This bizarre aging situation creates an unintentional time paradox that makes it impossible for audiences to take the revenge storyline seriously. Either Roberts' character has somehow managed to avoid aging for 3 decades, or the filmmakers simply didn't bother to use any makeup, prosthetics, or different actors to show the passage of time. The mistake is so obvious that it has become one of the most frequently cited examples of poor continuity planning in 1990s action films. Fact 7. John Barry called executives wankers. John Barry, the legendary composer behind the James Bond theme and countless other iconic film scores, created what many consider to be one of his finest works for The Specialist, but his relationship with Warner Brothers ended in spectacular fashion when he publicly insulted the studio's music executives. Barry had composed a complete orchestral score for the film, including a beautiful vocal performance of the main love theme that was intended to play over the end credits as the movie concluded. Barry's score was a lush, romantic composition that perfectly captured the steamy Miami atmosphere and the complex relationship between Stallone and Stone's characters. The end credits song was particularly special to Barry, as it featured a gorgeous vocal arrangement that served as the emotional culmination of his entire musical contribution to the film. He had worked carefully to create a piece that would leave audiences with a lasting impression as they left the theater. However, when the final cut of the movie was assembled, Warner Brothers made a decision that completely blindsided and infuriated the composer. Without consulting Barry or giving him any advance warning, the studio executives removed his carefully crafted end credits song and replaced it with Gloria Estefan's upbeat dance version of Turn the Beat Around. The executives believed that Estefan's energetic pop song would be more commercially successful and appeal to a broader audience than Barry's more sophisticated orchestral piece. Barry was absolutely livid about this last-minute change, and he didn't keep his feelings to himself. In a public interview, the normally diplomatic composer unleashed his fury on the studio, calling the head of Warner Brothers' music department a wanker in front of reporters and industry professionals. This was an extremely unusual public outburst for Barry, who was typically known for his professionalism and British reserve. The public insult permanently damaged Barry's relationship with Warner Brothers, and he never worked with the studio again after The Specialist was completed. Fact 8. Bus numbers magically changed mid-fight. One of the most easily spotted continuity errors in The Specialist occurs during Stallone's memorable bus fight scene, where the vehicle itself apparently transforms into a completely different bus in the middle of the action sequence. The scene begins when Stallone's character, Ray Quick, boards a Miami public transit bus and politely offers his seat to a pregnant woman. When a rude young man takes the seat instead, Quick decides to teach him and his friends a lesson about basic courtesy. The fight sequence is meant to showcase Quick's combat skills and establish his moral character. But careful viewers will notice something strange happening with the bus itself during the confrontation. When Stallone first gets on the bus at the beginning of the scene, the vehicle clearly displays the number 9372 on its exterior. This number is visible in several shots as Quick boards the bus and the initial confrontation begins to unfold. However, during the most dramatic moment of the fight, when Stallone grabs one of the thugs and throws him bodily through the bus window in a spectacular display of action movie violence, the bus number has mysteriously changed. The exterior shots showing the thug crashing through the glass and tumbling out onto the street reveal that the bus is now numbered 9369 instead of the original 9372. This continuity error suggests that the filmmakers used at least 2 different buses during the filming of this single scene, possibly because the first bus was damaged during the window-breaking stunt, or because they needed multiple takes to get the action sequence just right. The production team either failed to notice that the buses had different numbers, or they simply didn't think that audiences would pay close enough attention to spot the discrepancy. The mistake has since become one of the most frequently cited examples of sloppy continuity work in 1990s action films. Fact 9. Stallone's wife ended his love scenes forever. The steamy shower scene between Stallone and Sharon Stone in The Specialist had consequences that extended far beyond the movie theater, ultimately changing the entire trajectory of Stallone's career when it came to romantic scenes. Jennifer Flavin, who was Stallone's girlfriend at the time and would later become his wife, was absolutely not pleased with her partner's intimate on-screen performance with one of Hollywood's most famous sex symbols. Flavin's reaction to seeing Stallone and Stone together in the notorious shower sequence was so negative that it created serious tension in their personal relationship. The scene, which featured both actors in a state of undress as they engaged in passionate lovemaking under cascading water, was one of the most talked-about moments in the film and became a major selling point for the movie's marketing campaign. However, what played well for audiences and box office receipts did not go over well at home. The former model made her feelings about the scene crystal clear to Stallone, expressing her discomfort and displeasure with watching her boyfriend in such an intimate situation with another woman, even if it was just acting. Her reaction was strong enough that Stallone realized he had a choice to make between his career opportunities and his personal relationship with the woman he loved. Stallone ultimately decided that his relationship with Flavin was more important than any potential roles that might require him to perform love scenes or intimate moments with other actresses. He made a personal commitment to avoid taking on parts that would involve romantic or sexual scenes in future films, effectively removing an entire category of roles from his career possibilities. This decision had a lasting impact on the types of projects Stallone would accept for the rest of his career. From that point forward, he focused almost exclusively on action roles that emphasized violence, explosions, and physical stunts rather than romance, ensuring that he would never again find himself in a situation that might upset his wife. Fact 10. The Hughes brothers also said no. The Specialist went through an unusually large number of potential directors before finally landing with Luis Loza, and among those who turned down the opportunity were Albert and Alan Hughes, the twin brothers who would soon become 2 of the most respected filmmakers in Hollywood. The Hughes brothers were offered the chance to direct the explosive action thriller, but they declined to take on the project and moved on to other opportunities that better matched their artistic vision. At the time when The Specialist was being developed, the Hughes brothers were still relatively new to the film industry, but they had already established themselves as promising young directors with a distinctive style and powerful storytelling abilities. They had made their debut just 1 year earlier with Menace II Society, a gritty urban drama that explored life in the inner city of Los Angeles with unflinching honesty and raw emotional power. Menace II Society had been both a critical and commercial success, earning widespread praise for its authentic portrayal of street life and its complex examination of violence, poverty, and social issues in urban America. The film demonstrated that the Hughes brothers had a unique talent for creating intense, character-driven stories that resonated with audiences while tackling serious social themes. Given their success with Menace II Society and their reputation for making thoughtful, socially conscious films, it's not entirely surprising that the Hughes brothers chose to pass on The Specialist. The project was clearly intended to be a mainstream action thriller focused on explosions, romance, and star power, rather than the kind of deep character study and social commentary that had made their previous work so compelling. The Hughes brothers' decision to turn down The Specialist allowed them to maintain their artistic integrity and continue developing projects that aligned with their creative vision. Their choice proved to be wise, as they went on to direct other acclaimed films that cemented their reputation as serious filmmakers rather than directors for hire on commercial action movies. Fact 11. It was 1993's best unproduced script, Before The Specialist ever made it to movie theaters, the screenplay had already earned a prestigious recognition that highlighted just how much potential the film industry saw in the project. In January of 1993, the Los Angeles Times conducted an extensive survey of Hollywood insiders to determine which unproduced scripts showed the most promise, and The Specialist emerged as the clear winner in the thriller category. The newspaper's poll was no casual survey of random opinions, but rather a carefully conducted evaluation that included 40 of the most influential and knowledgeable professionals working in the entertainment industry at the time. These respondents included talent agents who represented major stars, producers who had successfully brought numerous films to the screen, and studio executives who were responsible for deciding which projects would receive the green light and financial backing necessary to move from script to finished movie. The fact that these industry veterans selected The Specialist as the best unproduced thriller script speaks to the high expectations that surrounded the project long before any cameras started rolling. These were people whose careers depended on their ability to identify which scripts had the greatest potential to become successful films, both critically and commercially. Their collective endorsement suggested that the story had all the elements necessary to become a major hit. The recognition from the Los Angeles Times poll undoubtedly helped generate additional interest in the project from major stars and established directors who might not have otherwise considered taking on the film. When a script receives this kind of industry recognition, it often becomes much easier to attract top-tier talent and secure the substantial financial backing needed to produce a big-budget action thriller. The irony, of course, is that despite all the early enthusiasm and professional endorsement, the finished film would go on to receive largely negative reviews from critics and mixed reactions from audiences, proving that even the most promising scripts can face challenges during the production process. Fact 12. James Woods' scene was Stallone's last-minute addition. One of the most memorable confrontations in The Specialist only exists because Sylvester Stallone desperately wanted to share screen time with James Woods and took matters into his own hands by writing new material at the last possible moment. The scene in question features a tense knife-threatening encounter between Stallone's character Ray Quick and Eric Roberts' villain Tomas Leon. But according to Roberts himself, this dramatic moment was never part of the original screenplay. Eric Roberts revealed in interviews that Stallone personally wrote the knife scene just days before it was scheduled to be filmed, creating an entirely new confrontation that would allow the action star to appear on screen alongside Woods during the sequence. The original script apparently had Roberts and Woods working together in various scenes, but Stallone realized that he had very few opportunities to interact directly with Woods' character throughout the movie. This presented a problem for Stallone, who clearly wanted to take advantage of having such a talented and charismatic actor as Woods in the film. Woods was known for his intense, unpredictable performances and his ability to steal scenes from other actors, so having him in the movie without sharing significant screen time would have been a missed opportunity for dramatic fireworks between the two performers. Rather than accept the limitation of the existing script, Stallone took it upon himself to create a new scene that would give him the chance to go head-to-head with Woods in a dramatic confrontation. The knife-threatening sequence allowed both actors to display their characters' dangerous sides, while creating the kind of tension-filled moment that action movie audiences expect from such encounters. The fact that this scene was added so late in the production process shows how much creative control Stallone had over the final version of the film and how willing he was to modify the story to ensure he got the dramatic moments he wanted with his co-stars. Fact 13. Razzie Award winner for Worst Screen Couple. Sylvester Stallone and Sharon Stone's on-screen chemistry in The Specialist was so unconvincing that it earned them one of Hollywood's most infamous honors at the 15th Annual Golden Raspberry Awards in 1995. The Razzies, as they're commonly known, are a tongue-in-cheek awards ceremony that recognizes the worst performances in films of each year, and Stone and Stallone's romantic pairing was deemed so awkward that it deserved special recognition in the Worst Screen Couple category. What made this particular Razzie win even more notable was that Stone and Stallone didn't win the award outright, but instead tied for the dubious honor with another high-profile Hollywood duo. Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, two of the biggest movie stars in the world at the time, received the exact same number of votes for their performances in Interview with the Vampire, the gothic horror film based on Anne Rice's popular novel. The fact that these four major stars all shared the same embarrassing award speaks to just how poorly their respective romantic and dramatic partnerships were received by both critics and audiences. In the case of Stone and Stallone, their lack of believable chemistry was particularly problematic because the entire plot of The Specialist revolved around the intense attraction and complicated relationship between their two characters. The Razzie voters apparently felt that neither pair of actors managed to create any convincing emotional connection on screen, despite the millions of dollars spent on production and the considerable star power involved in both projects. For Stone and Stallone, the award was especially stinging because their film was marketed heavily around their steamy scenes together, including the notorious shower sequence that had generated so much behind-the-scenes drama. The shared Razzie win highlighted how even the biggest names in Hollywood could fail to generate believable romantic chemistry when the script, direction, or performances simply didn't work together effectively. Fact 14. The exploding hotel room had no neighbors. One of the most glaring continuity errors in The Specialist involves Stallone's hotel room mysteriously transforming from part of a busy hotel floor into a completely isolated structure just in time for a spectacular explosion. The mistake is so obvious that it raises serious questions about whether anyone was paying attention during the editing process, as it involves two completely contradictory versions of the same location appearing within minutes of each other. Earlier in the film, when James Woods' character and his men are making their way to Stallone's hotel room to confront him, the camera clearly shows them walking down a long hotel corridor that stretches in both directions. The hallway is lined with multiple doors on both sides, indicating that Stallone's room is just one of many guest rooms on a typical hotel floor. The men pass several other room doors as they make their way down the passage, establishing that the area is a standard hotel layout with numerous accommodations for guests. However, when Stallone's room explodes in a massive fireball just moments later, the exterior shot of the building tells a completely different story. The camera shows the explosion blowing out what appears to be a single, isolated room with absolutely nothing visible to either the left or right of it. The hotel floor that was previously shown to contain multiple rooms and a long hallway has somehow been transformed into a structure where Stallone's room exists in complete isolation. This continuity error suggests that the filmmakers used two entirely different locations or sets for the interior hallway shots and the exterior explosion sequence, without bothering to ensure that they matched each other logically. The mistake is particularly noticeable because the two contradictory versions of the hotel layout appear so close together in the film, making it impossible for viewers to ignore the obvious discrepancy between what they've just seen inside the building and what the explosion reveals from the outside. Fact 15. Mel Gibson and Wesley Snipes almost starred. Before Sylvester Stallone ever stepped into the role of Ray Quick, the explosive expert at the center of The Specialist, the casting process for the lead character went through several different possibilities that could have dramatically changed the entire tone and style of the finished film. Both Mel Gibson and Wesley Snipes were seriously considered for the starring role, and either choice would have brought a completely different energy and approach to the character than what Stallone ultimately delivered. At the time The Specialist was being developed, Mel Gibson was at the height of his popularity following his success in the Lethal Weapon franchise and his acclaimed work as both an actor and director. Gibson's potential involvement would have brought a more intense, psychologically complex approach to the role of the troubled former CIA operative. His natural charisma and ability to portray characters with dark, haunted backgrounds might have given the revenge storyline a more serious, dramatic weight than it ended up having under Stallone's interpretation. Wesley Snipes represented an equally intriguing alternative casting choice, particularly given his rising star status in the action genre during the early 1990s. Snipes had recently demonstrated his action movie credentials in films like Passenger 57 and would soon become a major action star with the Blade franchise. His athletic build, martial arts skills, and natural intensity could have transformed Ray Quick into a more physically dynamic and acrobatic character, potentially emphasizing hand-to-hand combat over the explosive expertise that became central to Stallone's version. The fact that the studio ultimately chose Stallone over these other high-profile candidates suggests that they were specifically looking for the kind of muscular, straightforward action hero persona that had made him famous through the Rocky and Rambo films. Both Gibson and Snipes might have brought more nuanced acting abilities to the role, but Stallone's established reputation as an action star apparently made him the safer commercial choice for what the studio hoped would be a major box office success.